And welcome to this edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Hello, Keith. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Uh,
Uh,
let's just jump right into it. Why don't you introduce our guest today?
I'll be glad to. I've got another one of them Smith boys on here today, Sandy Smith. Sandy and I go back a long ways. He and I have run into one another over the years in Oak Ridge, and interestingly enough, he and his Sandy Smith seminars are well known nationally, probably more well known in the Fortune 500 companies even than he is in Oak Ridge. That's why this is a hidden history about Oak Ridge, because people here local may not know as much about Sandy as some of the folks do nationally and occasionally even internationally. But he and I have worked together in some of the nonprofits in town. ADFAC, the Aid for Distressed Families of Appalachian Counties, and Free Medical Clinic. On both of those, he's helped to do strategic planning and helped to lead us in seminars. But he does this on a much broader scale than just helping us locally. But I wanted him to come on and talk to us about his career, about not only what he does when he's a coach or when he comes in as a consultant and helps companies with their problems that have anything to do, ranging from how to implement change all the way to good leadership and what that really means, not just platitudes and words, but what it really means to be a good leader in an effective company. So, Sandy, let's start out by just having you tell us how you come to be in a career like you are, and talk a little about your connection to Oak Ridge and how you reach out to companies across the nation. Okay, tell us how you got started.
Um, well, how I actually got started, I started out in a very different career than what I have now, because my world today is I get a phone call from an executive, a VP of human resources, whatever, however they find my name, and they are inviting me to come into their organization, wherever that is. In Fort Lauderdale, in Chicago, in London, in Amsterdam, it could be anywhere internationally, and to come in and work with their organization. And generally, I'm giving a keynote address at a conference, because that's mainly what I do for a living, is keynote addresses. Um, but So in essence, I get that phone call. I drive to the airport. I get on an airplane. I fly into Chicago or wherever it is, the conference. I jump in a taxi. I go to the hotel or conference center, give a presentation, and then return home. Um, where my life really started out in Oak Ridge was very, very different. My training and my education in 4 years of college and in 3 years in graduate school, I was trained as a family therapist. And so I wasn't getting on airplanes. I was sitting in my comfortable office. My clients were coming for counseling for whatever the issue was. And I would work with them for an hour and then see them 2 weeks later in terms of follow up. And so, as a family counselor, an interesting trend occurred several years ago, and I was doing this in Oak Ridge. And the trend was that my clients were coming for counseling, and they would come in and they didn't focus on their family. They focused on the world of work, issues at work. It was their work related family that they were having trouble with. And then frequently I would have a senior VP of HR or whatever, and they would say, our organization is having an offsite management retreat, our leadership retreat that we do every year. And they would invite me to come and speak or do a seminar with that audience. And that sort of opened the door to a different kind of consulting that I was used to. And so for 25 years then, I've been doing that with all kind of organizations, all kind of teams, from healthcare to manufacturing. And one of the things I learned early on is I first thought when I got into the business world, I thought, well, I don't know anything about the business world. I don't know sales. I don't know marketing. And so I was really on thin ice. But once I got into the business world and started hearing the stories and whatever, suddenly it occurred to me, this ain't no different. In other words, in other words, it's just a larger family, but similar issues. So it helped me make that transition, over time. And
Right.
I've been able to do that, continue for a number of years. And I've enjoyed, and I've learned more than sometimes my clients do.
I can appreciate that. What's the most common element that you see in this large work families? What are they mostly dealing with, and when you come in?
Well, and this won't surprise you or Keith, but one issue is change. Either that it's too much or it's too fast or whatever. But it's that numerous uh, successful organizations that I'm dealing with can anticipate change and innovation. Those that are much slower and it's much more painful tend to resist it, a new idea, a new way of thinking.
Nobody,
That I
nobody,
can
nobody
understand
likes change
that.
It's what,
for the
Keith?
most part.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keith's right. Nobody likes change. We all tend to resist it. And then some of us, and I've had a little experience, not nearly as much as you have, who have to introduce change in an organization. We have to realize that people, it's painful for people to change. But if you can anticipate the change and be a part of making it happen, then I think it becomes easier. Is that what you found, Sandy?
Well, to some degree, but I often have an opposite view, because one of the first things people will say, Ray, is, well, people just don't like change. And I said, if you told that to Arianna Huffington and Steve Jobs, they would walk out of the room, because they are change agents. They are constantly innovating. So when you start looking at that, it's really a different view.
I can see how that would be the case, because those individuals you talk about, I mean, they live change every day, and if it wasn't changing, they'd make something happen to make change.
Well, I have a couple of quotes that I use in my presentations, and one is from Professor Gary Hamel of the London School of Economics. He said, "Those who live by the sword will be shot by those who don't."
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
And another is with the futurist Alvin Toffler, who said the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who can't read or write, but those who are unwilling to learn and unlearn and relearn. And then I saw a quote the other day, said it's no longer K through 12, it's K through 90.
Lifelong learning.
Yes.
Well, how do you deal with these companies that are facing radical change, or not, or in fact resisting it, or not even recognizing the need to do it? What do you show them? What do you do when you go into a company?
Well, I usually, when a company brings me in, I have the opportunity to meet with senior leaders and meet with them one-on-one to hear their story, their philosophy, and then before we come back together for an offsite retreat. And usually that's ongoing. And the main thing is being able to test, what's the culture like? How open are they for conversation? Can they disagree with each other in healthy ways? And do they know how to dialogue? And so the first thing is just trying to get a sense of what is the culture like and what do they want it to be.
I would
So-
imagine, Sandy, I would imagine that, it's kind of like the old story about the preacher. The preacher, he said, this ministry job would be pretty good if you didn't have to deal with all those people. Which is kind of the point. I imagine interpersonal relationships and especially in the workplace are vital to at least, like you said a while ago, if you're able to disagree agreeably,
Yes.
then that's one thing. It's another thing if you make a comment and someone takes it like it's a personal attack. I
Yes.
would imagine that interpersonal relationships is a really healthy interpersonal relationships is really key to an effective organization as well.
Yes, it is. It is. But a number of the I remember when I was in that counseling role, a number of the people who came for counseling, as I said, they weren't talking about their family; they were talking about work-related issues. And the more they talk, the more I would see that they are in an organization that's toxic. It is not a healthy place. It's not a healthy well-being, but it's toxic, and it's taking its toll in terms of their stress and their burnout.
No one likes to be in an organization like that. So sometimes change is good.
Yes.
Well, how do you get their attention? I mean, you go in and you talk with them, you learn what they're going through, and what's your next step? What do you do then when you get them together? How do you introduce this idea of accepting change?
Well, frequently I will show them, and I've got a short video that I'd like to share that has to do with how fast the world is changing, and it's only 4 minutes, but I will show them something like I'm going to share with you, and then have them in small groups saying, what was the message of this 4-minute video? How does it relate to your organization?
Mm-hmm.
What is the key message? So I get them dialoguing with each other, and it's not a right or wrong discussion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see that video.
Where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, You've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen, the future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
Keith, does that
Well,
that message make sense to you?
Yep. Yeah, it does. I mean, it's frightening to a certain degree, but it's I guess there's been more innovation in the last 10 years than there was in the last 100, before that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And for some of us old guys like me and Ray, that's a little bit scary, even though we're probably two of the people that embrace it as a lot. I know Ray embraces technology.
oh, I do, and I've enjoyed, excuse me, I've enjoyed seeing the change that has taken place. I mean, hey, the best thing to come out of COVID is Zoom. You understand what I mean? The
Yes.
capability that we have to have a session like this in our homes and be able to bring this message visually to people. And yeah, but remember, when he said change is exponential, we're on that upward swing of exponential change, just like Keith said, in the last 10 years. What's the next 10 years going to bring? I mean,
Yeah.
they're building plants right this minute. They're building plants to build electric cars in a massive scale. And I've always said, stopping to charge a car is not going to work. You're going to have to put the charge capability in the roads so that we can charge as we go.
Yeah.
Well, there's somebody working on that. I guarantee you they're working on how to do that in that kind of fashion. So we haven't seen change yet, Keith.
And it's interesting, that whole concept of the video, and I kind of relate it to me and my students. If I'm going to relate it to me and my students, I teach video and audio production, and I tell my students, listen, I said, 5 years from now, the cameras that we're using, the equipment that we're using, is going to be completely different than what we've got right now. Okay.
Right.
So you're constantly going to have to be adapting and adjusting to new technology. I said, but the one constant and the one thing that I really want to focus on is I want to teach you how to be a good storyteller. Yeah. Because if you're a good storyteller, it doesn't matter what the technology is. That's a skill that you can have for the rest of your life. And so that's really what I want to do, is I want to teach my kids to be good storytellers and embrace whatever technology is available. I had a guy, a documentary filmmaker once. He was doing a workshop, and he was talking about a project that he did, and he was hired to do this documentary. And the people came to him and they were peppering him with all kinds of questions. Okay, so what camera are you going to use? What are you going to shoot on? And he was like, I don't know. He said, just something, whatever. And they said, well, why don't you know? He said, because that's not the most important thing. He says, the most important thing that you're hiring me for is I know how to talk to people. and I know how to get them to tell me things. So, it's those intangible concepts of being able to communicate effectively. That kind of goes back, Sandy, to your video. That's what it was talking about. He says technology is one thing, but there are things that cannot be automated.
That's right. That's right.
And that is one of them. As much as some AI people might think that they can, they're not going to be able to do that effectively.
Well, Keith, one thing I agree with you 100% is you touched on, and this is true with me as a professional speaker, and that is a storyteller. I remember I was flying to Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and I was sitting by a guy, and he says, "What do you do for a living?" And before I thought about it, I just said, "I'm a professional storyteller." And he says, "What do you mean?" And I told him a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The speakers that I know who are most gifted are able to illustrate their points with a fabulous story. In fact, one just popped into my mind. I heard the other day about a young girl in drawing class, and she was sitting in the back of the room on the last row. And the teacher in front of the room was curious, said she didn't think the young girl was paying attention. So she went back there and says, "Hun, what are you doing?" And the little girl said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher says, "Well, hun, don't you know that nobody knows what God looks like?" And the little girl looked up and says, "Well, they will in a minute."
Exactly right. Exactly right. And people respond. I don't care. People respond well to stories. I mean, it's just human nature. It was funny last semester. I had a teacher tell me that one of my students that I had, she was talking to this student, and she asked her. She said, "Well, what do you think of Mr. McDaniel?" And she says, "I really enjoy his class because I really like his stories."
Yeah.
And it wasn't the technology that I was teaching. It was the fact that I was illustrating the use of that technology with real experiences that I've had. And I'll relate it by telling them a story about something.
Well, and Keith, the stories that you tell, people remember them and they retell the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes on a life of its own.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's true.
It really does. I was talking just the other day, Keith, to we had a meeting trying to determine how to capture the history of Oak Ridge, how to preserve things that are being lost. For example, the wheat community that was here before Oak Ridge, all those people are dead now, and their children have information, they have things, they have artifacts, they have documents, things that they know is important, and they're afraid that their next generation, their children, won't understand the importance of it. So they're looking for somewhere to place this valuable information, but they want it to be stored well. They want it to be shared with the public. You understand those sorts of things.
Sure.
We were talking about how to do that, and the thought came across that we have to be careful. Technology is changing so quickly that some of the things that we used to do, you remember iPics? Does that strike a bell with you? They went around and took 360-degree photographs. They went inside buildings like K25. Well, we have all of that video and can't see it because there is no software that will run that iPics video. Yeah. Same thing happened to Don Raby. You remember he went down to Atlanta, brought back pictures of all of the structures that were here before the Manhattan Project. And because he liked the technology at the time, a little flip page technology that made it look like you were reading a book, he put it in that technology. Now we don't have that software. Microsoft didn't keep it up, and we can't open his books.
Wow.
So Sandy, technology is rampant, and the little stories I just told can be amplified 1,000 times by things that people are doing in their companies that don't recognize the change that's happening and put them in an obsolete technology.
Yes.
You agree?
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking the phrase I heard the other day, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Oh, that's good.
Mhm.
Yes.
It is. Well, another thing, Sandy, that you do, I'm sure, when you're talking to these senior managers and you're dealing with how they implement change or accept change or introduce change, you have to realize that one of the key things in any organization is the skill and the ability of the leaders to actually lead.
Yeah.
How do you deal with leadership when you're talking to these high-level individuals that may have gotten there because of some technical skill or some scientific knowledge, but their people skills are awful? How do you deal with that?
I was hearing the phrase the other day. That's short, but it has real meaning. Um, that leaders take people places they wouldn't go by themselves. And if you think about that in any industry, in any organization, in any family, if you will, leaders take people places that they wouldn't go by themselves. And that's why the key phrase or question I often am asking these senior leaders is, where do you want to be in the next 2 to 3 years in your organization? What's that look like? And that opens into a conversation.
I had a wise friend of mine just a few years ago. He said something to me. We were talking about leadership, and he said, a leader without any followers is just a fella taking a walk.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, you're not a leader unless you have any followers.
Keith, right. I've got that in a PowerPoint slide. That
oh, really?
Quote. Yeah, it's a guy. You're just taking a walk.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, that's so true. Well, how do you deal with that, Sandy? What do you do to help them to see the importance of taking people where they would not normally go?
Well, I'm usually in conversation. I'm usually asking, particularly the millennial generation, and those younger. They love change. They've grown up with change. Right. I mean, it's been part of their life, and so they want to be with an organization that's innovating and thinking out loud. And so I'm very often asking these senior leaders, who very often are older, who are the young leaders you have, women and men, that you see potential, and they've got talent, and how are you helping develop that instead of leaving them alone in a cubicle?
Yeah, that's an important concept, and it is, because although the younger generation lack experience, they often make up for that in creativity and enthusiasm.
Yes.
And an older leader that can recognize that and encourage that by giving them opportunities that they might not get otherwise can help a leader develop.
Yes.
Even a young leader.
Sandy, what do you think is the greatest obstacle to innovation and growth?
Well, it's something you said earlier. It is, your response to that video, because when I share that video and I have my audience of 50 people or whatever get in small groups and discuss what came out of this, and you hit it. One of the first things they say, that's scary. That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to have a discussion about that. Tell me more of what's scary. What, in other words, let's talk that out and get it out. And like I said, you get Arianna Huffington and Steve Jobs. Scary is not in their vocabulary.
Right. Mm.
That's a good point. Sure is. Well, what are your plans for the future, Sandy? What do you think? What have you got going on now, and what's coming up?
Well, I am continually speaking at conferences and interactive workshops. I'm writing business articles for periodicals. And so that's pretty much keeping me busy. And the good news, I mean, one week my client may be a group of emergency room physicians where we're doing an offsite retreat on whatever topic of communication and chaos. Or it may be a group of engineers at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is very different. Or it may be a group of elementary school teachers who are teaching young children. And so I'm constantly learning from my audiences.
And that's the key. Storytelling, as Keith pointed out, is an important method for conveying information that'll be retained.
Yes.
Recognizing your audience is also key, because you have to know how to present it to a, grammar school teachers versus, or grade school teachers versus scientists at the laboratory. The teachers are probably easier.
Yes, yes.
To say just a little bit about your passion for the nonprofit organizations in Oak Ridge. I mean, come on, Sandy, we know that when you fly to Amsterdam, you're not going over there for just a little bit of money. They paid you quite a bit to get you there, and they paid the cost to bring you over. But here in Oak Ridge, we can't afford you. So tell us a little bit about your philosophy for helping us here locally.
Well, I remember in the last few months, and you were a part of this, Ray. I think you gave them my name, but I was asked to facilitate an offsite with ADFAC and their leadership, their senior leadership, and then I was asked to facilitate an offsite with the free medical clinic that we did at the Alex Haley farm over in Clinton.
Yes, I remember.
And so
both
groups had awesome leadership.
Yeah. Well, Sandy, we fed you at least.
Yes.
Oh, seriously though, with your help, the skills you have that you've developed from a family therapist or counselor to a coach and a consultant, speaking at seminars, those skills that you develop because you've seen such a variety of audiences are invaluable. And the fact that you're willing to help us locally to work through strategic planning and offsites is a blessing. And we really, really do appreciate that. Now, let's give just a little bit of a commercial. People who are interested in Sandy and realize what he does. He's got a presence online, SandySmithSeminars.com. Is that correct? That's the website. And you can find him there and his contact information. Or if you just really keep your eyes open, he sits at the Kroger store in
Starbucks.
In Starbucks a lot. I don't know if he ever buys anything, but he sits.
That's my office.
And then the other place you can find him is in the Oak Ridge Library. It's kind of quiet there. And oh, by the way, Sandy, have you noticed how much we're expanding that Oak Ridge room in the library?
Yes.
That's fitting right into that idea that we met about the other night about how to capture this material that is going to be lost if there's not a good place to store it and keep it. That Oak Ridge room is developing into a key location for us to have those archival information and documents and pictures. So old Mike Stello's doing a good job.
Yes, he is.
But anyway, you can find Sandy around town when he's not off flying somewhere to a seminar to tell his stories and to help people implement change and leadership. Sandy, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you, Keith.
Thank you, Sandy. Ray, who do we have lined up next time?
Well, you remember last time we talked about Natasha, who was doing traveling out west, and we've delayed her talk for one iteration, and Sandy was kind enough to come in and fill in for us this time.
Okay, well,
But she'll be with us next time, and she's out in Washington and Oregon area now.
okay.
So, and remember, she's going around the country to all the nuclear sites. By the way, she stopped just a day or two ago. She stopped at a Minuteman missile site up in South Dakota.
Oh,
so
wow. Well,
it'll
good.
be interesting to see what she's up to.
Anxious to hear from her. All right, folks. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. And Sandy, thanks again for being our guest today. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.